Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Men and Sex. I'm your host, Mr. Wood. I am really excited about today's episode because this information that we're about to dive into drastically changed my life. And ultimately, it was a huge piece of me stepping into a new level of maturity, a new level of the type of man that I wanted to be and had to evolve out of as a young man in my teen years into my early 20s. There's these pieces of information and then experience that comes together that equates to that maturity. So this one's really near and dear to my heart. We've got Jay Schwartz here on the show, plant healing woman, a herbalist, a doula. Welcome to the show, Jay.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here.
Will you let's just talk about both of these for a second because I think they're infinitely deep. One of them, let's start with the herbalist side. Will you just give a simple explanation of that to the listeners?
Sure. An herbalist means someone, most oftentimes a woman, who is collecting, harvesting, and using medicinal plants to heal the body, mind, and soul. In my particular apothecary, about 90% of the herbs that we work with are herbs that our team forages and wildcrafts from the area in a sustainable way. And we make them into teas and tinctures and skincare, a whole variety of a line that is rooted in the medicinal benefits of plants.
And I'll just share my own experience because I haven't shared this with the listeners before. I got into permaculture for a while. I love going and understanding what medicines are in nature, what food sources are in nature. And once again, I'm all about freedom and freedom is a part of power, and I think that really comes from knowing where food and medicine exists outside of the grocery store. So, if this is something you haven't gotten into as a man, I encourage you, especially if you want to be a father, if you are a father, these are types of things to have your finger on the pulse of is where is the food and where is the medicine outside of the grocery store? Because the truth is, you never know what's going to happen, and it's part of that power, I feel like. So let's go into another infinitely deep subject, which is being a doula.
Yeah, this term used to be a really simple term, and now there's a lot more nuance with what it means. To me, being a doula means I support women through the process of conceiving babies and having sovereign births, right? So that could look like a woman who's reaching out to me and is struggling with her fertility and wants to help her hormones come into balance so that she can conceive. Or it could look like a woman gets pregnant and decides, I don't know if I actually want to carry this baby. And I'm someone who will hold space and help women arrive to clarity in their decision. Or it could look like a client reaches out and is like, I'm in birth right now. Come, baby's coming in 20 minutes, and then I'll show up. So there's a wide spectrum. And obviously postpartum support. So a part of the doula role is after woman births, tending to the mom's physical, emotional, energetic needs through food, touch, herbs, boundaries, everything to keep our mamas and babies well.
I think it's insane the lack of importance that's placed on this process that you're speaking to right now and how overlooked it is. I feel like every man should know about it, every human should know about it, and as a community, as a people, it should be infinitely supported the process of birthing and taking care of mothers after they give birth because that's those become people and those people are what becomes the world and it's part of my passion to be a part of this in any way of supporting parents, and I think as I continue on my journey I'm going to get more into this, so I'm grateful for all the people that show up and do this work.
Totally. I mean, if you think about it, everyone in the community, everybody in the tribe used to know about this, right? I mean, it used to be that men were very much not welcome into the birth space, and there's so much nuance about, whether that should be the case now, because oftentimes now men are actually invited into the birth space, and I think every woman should choose that on her own. But if you think about it, like we used to know these skills because people used to be birthing in front of your eyes. And so if it wasn't a medicalized process that got shoved away and pushed out into the hospital, by the virtue of it being just in front of your face, everybody, including men, used to know about it. So I hope that we are like arriving in a time and day where understanding different natural physiological processes in the body, especially in women's bodies, gets less tabooed overall. Yeah.
And I was talking to Jay before the show that I wanted to start with some of my story and then dive into the actual understanding of this because, as I said in the beginning of the show, this subject's really important to me. It had a huge impact on my life. And what I was sharing with Jay is that when I was in my late teens, early 20s, any time that I went to experiences where there was sexuality involved, I had extreme stress around was this person pregnant or not? And even if I used a condom, even if there was safety involved, I couldn't help but feel that stress. And it was a similar conversation in me and my friends. We were very much in a period of our life where freedom was important to us. We loved what we were doing. We loved snowboarding. We loved adventuring. And that stress hit a lot of us of, wow, like, all right, I'm waiting till her next period. I'm waiting till that next cycle to be alleviated from the stress. And then if it was a partner that was long term, then it was basically that cycle all over again of 3 weeks of stress or something like that. And it got to a point where it felt like it wasn't worth it. And one of the pivotal changes in my life and why I'm so excited to dive into this topic was when I started to learn about a woman's cycle and I started to understand ovulation and these different phases in the cycle. It actually allowed me to have breathe some relaxation because I knew when my partner was more like available to become pregnant. And it created a bond between me and my partner. I started to we keep track of her cycle with her, and it was this beautiful, intimate thing in our relationship. But ultimately, I felt so much power in the knowledge that I got from this experience with her. So let's just, Jay teaches this, and we're going to share more information about that at the end. But I'd love to just break this down from the stress to the freedom of understanding some of these things and going into the information.
Totally. Well, something that you shared just stirred in me a desire to just name that physiologically in the body, when we are moving through lots of stress and fear, our sex drive, our libido literally gets shut down. And that is an evolutionary process of the body that is so wise and should not be shamed. And if we are looking at our current menstrual and sex education or the lack thereof that most people are being exposed to in America, we understand why not just men, also women, all people are holding so much fear around conception. And even if the only reason why we learn about the menstrual cycle is to meet that fear with logic and with science, so that the fear dissipates, so that our libidos, our life forces come back, that on its own is a valid reason to learn about the menstrual cycle. And the menstrual cycle helps us to see and hold that its value goes way beyond the ability to conceive life. It is a process of releasing, rebirthing, coming back to life, resurgence. It mimics the land. Exactly. When we think about all four seasons, that, well, depending on where you live, you might not have all four seasons, but I'm thinking about my childhood in the Northeast. We had all four seasons. If any of those seasons were too short, we would notice that, right? We would be like, that's weird. Like it's February and it feels like spring, for example, right? Here, I'm living in Colorado right now. It's March. March is the month of like manic weather, right? In Colorado, it's half of the time it's spring, half of the time it's wintry snow. It's the nature of it. And so as humans, it's normal for us to notice patterns of like the seasons being too short or too long, right? With climate change, unfortunately, everything is getting out of whack. But the menstrual cycle just perfectly is a mirror to the ecosystem of the land. There are four phases of the cycle, just like there are four phases of seasons. And if any of those phases of the menstrual cycle are too short or too long, there's something wrong or there's an imbalance. And not only is there an imbalance when it comes to hormones, there's an emotional impact when there is an imbalance. So, yeah, there's so much that I'm excited to get into, but I just really want to state that we hold two things to be true here. One is that the menstrual cycle is a vital teacher to understand conception, to understand what is fertility and how to conceive life and how to have sovereignty in that process. And also, the menstrual cycle holds value that is completely independent to baby making. And it is a potent teacher for us to sit with our relationship with the land and the ecosystem.
This is this is that curveball you talked about earlier. Why are guys so afraid of the menstrual cycle? I have never personally understood this. I've never felt weird about it. I've never felt, but I feel that there's this in the collective, men are extremely scared of the menstrual cycle. I don't personally get it.
I think there's so many reasons, but one really important piece is that it really comes down to how was the words period, blood, pads, tampon, how were those words spoken or not spoken when you were in your childhood? Specifically from the years probably about, you know, 0 until 8. Was your mother hiding her menstrual blood from you? Or was she peeing in front of you and you were seeing a pad that had blood on it? Was she going into her medicine cabinet to take the Tylenol? And then you as a kid were like, Mommy, what's wrong? Did she fabricate something to you? Did she lie? Or did she tell you, yeah, I'm bleeding. In this context, bleeding is actually really good, is really healthy. It's an indication of how healthy and well and grounded mommy is. And I'm experiencing some pain, so I'm taking some medicine to help, right? I mean, something that I always come back to, and I teach in my course, Men Menstruation, is that it makes so much sense that men instinctively perceive menstrual blood to be synonymous with blood,
Hmm,
but they are extremely different.
hmm.
If you think about it historically and sociologically, it was predominantly men going out to battlefield. And so in men's bodies, we have this collective remembrance of
Ooh,
trauma, of blood as an indication of war, as an indication that your fellow brother got hurt or God
wow.
forbid died, right? Some of like the most strongest um, imagery that I think we have for ancient brotherhood is going out to the field, sacrificing your life, saving a friend's life, right? And
Yeah.
so the association with blood is violence
Hmm,
or something's wrong. Something's
hmm,
really wrong.
hmm.
And when something is wrong, our body, our nervous system instinctively tenses up or responds in fight or flight and is like, what can I do to run away from this or fix this? Now we enter the phase of menstrual blood. We bring in the concept of menstrual blood as it contracts to blood, and it doesn't mean anything's wrong. It actually is an indication of a woman's health. If a woman is not having a bleed every single month up until she's menopausal or even perimenopausal, then something's wrong. And so it's really hard for men to weed those things out, to make to understand that there's a difference between menstrual blood and blood. Because to on the eye, right, they both look red.
Do you also think that women really bought into it in some way of hiding it being bad and wrong. And so they were hiding it. And then, so that it is this kind of this thing that was happening all together where they were starting to buy into this thing that they hide it, don't be in public, don't talk to anyone about it. And that just added to that.
It's kind of like the classic, where's the chicken and where's the egg? Which
Yeah.
one came first, right? Because simultaneously, sweet, precious young boys are being raised by their mothers and fathers, and
Yeah.
stereotypically, their mother isn't speaking to them about it, is holding some shame about it, or is being told by her female friends or by her husband that she shouldn't be speaking about it to her kids because that's what a proper woman does,
Yeah.
right? Stereotypically, the father in that family would be avoided, not available, working and gone, not present for those day-to-day routines where the mother and son would, you know, get to know the menstrual cycle as an opportunity of learning, right? And then there's also a piece of thinking about that mother's psyche, that she herself learned that she should be ashamed of this from her mother, from her older sisters. And so I don't think we can pinpoint where it comes from,
Yeah.
whether,
Yeah.
which one's the chicken or the egg.
Yeah.
But we do realize that the fear of menstrual blood is not our own authentic fear. It was given to us. It is something that is passed down through ancestors' words, through what we say to our kids, and through what we don't say, right? Kids are really brilliant. If we don't speak about something
Yeah.
consistently, they will notice and they'll be like, why don't we talk about this?
Mm.
And as a parent or as a teacher, you have the opportunity to own that or not. God knows that the average public school teacher, bless them, who do such important work, are
Yeah.
definitely not being taught to have these vulnerable, intricate, and intimate, radical conversations about the body, right? So the average kid is not being exposed to it as in their own home, not speaking to about it at school. And then at school and through ads and through everything, we're receiving this cultural message that it's something that is like, I feel like as a kid, I saw people like whisper, like, she has her period. And I'm sure me, when I was an obnoxious kid, was like, what does that mean that she has her period? And I doubt that the adult that I said to that question to, I doubt that they had the comfortability in their own system to actually talk about it.
Yeah.
So
I
it
was
feels like just layers and layers of taboo that is given to us.
I was just reflecting while you're talking about how I think the two main things men know about a woman's cycle are PMS and then when she's menstruating, when she's bleeding. Those are like the things that are most common to know about. PMS is definitely a negative connotation. It's like avoid, but because they're going to be moody. And then there's another negative connotation with the menstrual cycle, which is most men are like, oh, that's the time of the month we're not going to be intimate. And those are like the two most popular things that known about a woman's cycle. And we haven't even gotten to the ovulation, which is an incredibly important phase to understand. So let's just dive into these other aspects of the cycle.
Totally. So the way I teach the four phases of the menstrual cycle to the men in my cohort is MFOL. Mother fucking oh Lord. I find that a really funny and playful acronym that is nothing to do with the menstrual cycle is actually really helpful. I feel like all of us have been like, oh Lord, and we've definitely seen movies that are like, oh motherfucker. So, motherfucker, oh Lord is how I like to teach because it helps the brain remember. We have four phases of the menstrual cycle. It starts with menstruation. Now, some people say menstruation is the end of the month. Some people say it's the beginning of the month. For the sake of tracking the menstrual cycle in fertility awareness method, meaning for understanding the fertility process, menstruation is the beginning. So once a woman starts bleeding, she's releasing and starting anew. Okay. We have menstruation. We have follicular, which is coming from the word follicle that gets developed. We have ovulation, and then we have luteal, Luteal. It sounds like you're saying luteal, like with a D, but it's actually spelled with a T. Now, the PMS, what's fascinating of what you shared is that a lot of people hear the term PMS, but if you were to ask someone, when does the PMS happen? There's a wide range of answers. People don't understand even that PMS is hormonally and physiologically connected to one of the four phases. There's a cultural perception that it's like 3 weeks a month, she's PMS, and 1 week, she's bleeding. When in reality, if a woman is bleeding for 7 days, that's an indication of hormonal imbalance. 7 days is way too long.
Yeah.
4 to 6 is like the juicy window. And even so, sometimes 6 could be good or sometimes not supportive for her body. It depends on the individual. Right. So I think it's just so fascinating that we have these like, everybody will be like, yeah, I know what PMS is. But when you ask people, what is PMS? People don't know. PMS is actually premenstrual symptoms. It's referring to a category of more than 150 different symptoms that could be happening for a woman physiologically, anatomically, and emotionally in the 9 to 11 days leading up to her period. Right? So as I say that, the luteal phase is the phase of the menstrual cycle where PMS comes forward. Now, if a woman experiences good and healthy hormones, not hormonal imbalance, she has very little PMS. And that is something that people don't realize. PMS is an indication of typically hormonal imbalance. Now you can have healthy and grounded hormones with still some aspects of PMS, but they're not synonymous. And how I like to rephrase PMS is please make space.
Mm.
It's a time where the woman is sometimes unskillfully, dare I add and acknowledge, I've definitely been unskillful in my luteal phase, right? But it's a time where she is kindly or unskillfully saying, please make space for my process. It's also a time where her body is saying to her brain, please make space for my body needs.
Mm.
My body's needs are going to be different during these 9 to 11 days. I really need you to make space for them. I really need you to allow and accept that I'm a cyclical being where at every stage of the menstrual cycle, I have different needs, right? So, of all the four phases of the menstrual cycle, women have distinct emotional and physiological needs. And that impacts what food she needs, how much sleep she needs, what type of sex she wants, how much outside time does she want? Does she want a really social gathering? Is she craving a salty or more acidic food? It also impacts what type of exercises, different types of exercises are supportive for female physiology in a way that is completely different for the male body, right? And getting back to what you were sharing about why the menstrual cycle can be so hard for men is because our whole entire society is revolved around being linear. Almost all the research trials and studies we've done in our clinical trials were based off of male bodies. I believe only until 1960s did they realize, we are making conclusions about the whole collective and what the whole collective needs in terms of their body based off of the male body. But more than 50% of the collective is female. I mean, if you think about it, everything that we have of education on the body up until 1960, which is not so far away ago, was all based in the male body. And so the menstrual cycle forces us to unlearn and see point blank that everything in our society is under the quotation and the parentheses of, well, this is for a male body.
I want
This
to
is for a linear
I
person.
want to pull these two apart just a little bit before we go on and just talk about them because I think they're really important understandings to have. First, I want to talk about cyclical being and just tease that apart a little bit more for the listeners, just because I think it's so important to understand this about our female partners or even just the women in our lives to understand what it means to be a cyclical being. I know we've talked about it, but let's just tease it apart and simplify it even more.
Totally. So getting back to what we were saying before of the menstrual cycle mimics the land. In a normal year, the land moves through winter, spring, summer, and fall. And we and our psyches as humans rely on our calendar, our understanding of time to go through themes. Every season brings and evokes for us different themes, right? Winter time is much more nesting time, tending to the body, staying warm, tending to community, grounding, getting internal. In contrast, summertime for us, right, is around planting our garden, harvesting, traveling, and not just harvesting food, harvesting wisdom. You go abroad, you collect, you learn from a teacher, social gatherings, parties, beaches, right? That's a way that we all understand, men and women understand cyclicality as it's in a cycle. We continue returning to the same theme a year later. Every year we move through winter, spring, summer, and fall. Now, in a woman's body, she experiences all four of these seasons every single month. Okay. An example right now, I'm in the luteal phase of my menstrual cycle. I'm on cycle day 23. I
I
bleed
love
on,
that you know this day you're on. That's
oh,
amazing.
yeah. I track my cycle like a precious baby. She is so important to me. And
Yeah.
I typically bleed on cycle day 28. So I have about 5 days until I'm going to bleed, right? Where I am in Colorado right now, outside, we're about to be entering to spring. But I am in the fall phase of my menstrual cycle. So, practically, for all the men who are listening, the menstrual cycle highlights that although externally the women are experiencing the same season as you, internally in her body, in her hormones, in her emotional needs, it could be a different season, which means there's a contrast. Now, for example, I could be ovulating in my inner summer during the summertime, which means that the land around me is mimicking the needs of my body. Why the menstrual cycle is such a radical tool for men is to realize that, yeah, you could be reaching out to her and it could be a random day in spring, but her desires of what type of date is going to be one potentially of inner fall or inner winter or inner summer. And so when you understand the menstrual cycle and understand that every phase of the cycle indicates different needs for how she wants to spend time, it's basically a copy and paste tool for men to learn how to relate to women in harmony. You memorize the different needs of the menstrual cycle. You memorize where your particular partner, friend, coworker, I know all of my coworkers' menstrual cycle. All of my employees, I know their menstrual cycle. I can't meet their needs and know their cyclical needs without knowing their menstrual cycle. Because it's so helpful to be like, well, right now, I am ovulating, so I feel like a badass. I feel like I could do anything. You can give me the most challenging thing, and my inner world will be, yes, I can do that. But if I then take that task and give it to my employee when she's bleeding, I, as a menstrual cycle educator, know that because she's bleeding, she might not have that level of confidence in her inner voice. And that's not a flaw. She's only going to be in that phase for 4 to 6 days. And I can trust that then she's going to enter into the follicular phase, and then she's going to ovulate, and then she's going to go into the luteal phase. So there's a predictability. When we talk about cyclicality, it means every few days, women's needs shift. They're not like men who are moved and going according to the sun. Women move according to the moon.
Let's talk about how, because this is one of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to issues that we face, I think, in relationship is how cyclical beings are being pushed in a linear society. So I want to tease that apart a little bit too, of the linear society that we see that doesn't adhere to the internal cycles and also is trying to eradicate the external cycles by everything being thermostat driven, having lights on that you can have it, and you can control the temperature so the outer world doesn't even matter anymore. So let's just tease that linear society apart a little bit.
Totally. I feel like the best example of this is gym. If you're a gym bro listening, or you're just a man who values going to the gym, and maybe you're dating a woman who likes to go to the gym with you, learning the menstrual cycle is going to make everything make sense. What I mean by that is, okay, for a man, if he gets the same amount of sleep, let's say you learn that your body needs 7.5 hours of sleep. Okay. You get 7.5 hours of sleep, you take your shower, you have your protein rich breakfast, you get some sunlight, right? And you head to the gym. You're feeling like, yeah, I checked off all the boxes. Now I'm ready to go to the gym and I'm down to lift some weights. Let's say you're lifting up like 80 pounds at a time. Okay. If you invite your woman to go to the gym with you, when she's ovulating, her body has the most capacity to build muscle. Simultaneously, her brain is giving her and endorsing the voice of, you can do this. So you go to the gym and you lift up 80 pounds, and she's going to be like, damn, you're a hottie. Let me try that. And her body is going to feel strong and her brain is going to feel capable, which is the perfect recipe, right, for lifting weights. She's going to do it. And if she's hella strong in general, she can lift 80 pounds. I mean, I don't know if I could lift 80 pounds, but I probably could do like 60. I probably lift about 60 pounds of beeswax in the apothecary, right? So that is an ovulating woman's brain. Okay. Once ovulation is over, okay, 5 days later, you're like, let's go to the gym again. She gets the same amount of sleep as she got in the ovulation phase. She eats the same breakfast. She gets the same amount of sunlight. Everything about her morning routine is the exact same. When she goes to the gym and she sees you lifting weights and lifting 60 or 80 pounds, her inner voice is not going to be like, yeah, I could do that. Her inner brain, her voice is probably going to be like, I don't know if I could do that. Or like, "Ah, I can't believe you show off. I can't do that." Or it could be, it depends on her personality type, right? It's some inner voice that is doubting her. It's some inner voice that is negative, that assumes that she's not capable. Or, and simultaneously, in the luteal phase, women's estrogen levels are lower. So her sense of confidence and motivation is lower. So maybe her brain's like, yeah, I could do that, but her body feels more tired. Her body doesn't feel energized. So when I say cyclical beings and understand the ways in which women are living in a linear world, is we have collectively said for men and for women that we should set these goals and we should be able to achieve them every day. All of these wellness influencers are just like, set these goals, write them down. If you're just consistent enough, you'll meet your goals. And that works for male bodies. It doesn't work for female bodies because the hormonal shifts throughout the whole cycle deeply impact whether or not she feels motivated, confident, energized, or capable, right? Practically, when women enter the luteal phase, they typically need at least 1 to 2 more hours of sleep than they do when they're ovulating. Now, most women don't know this, and so they will set and schedule the same amount of sleep all the time. And then they will wake up when they're luteal and they'll be like, why am I so tired? Now, if we don't know the menstrual cycle, it's very easy for women and other people to gaslight that woman and be like, "Oh, I don't know, something's wrong with you. Why are you so tired all the time?"
Mm.
When the reality is, because her estrogen levels have shifted and her progesterone levels have shifted, and she's in the luteal phase, there's nothing wrong with her. It's actually something that she can predict. Women can predict that they will need more sleep. Men can predict that when their partners are in the luteal phase, they will be more hungry more often, typically less horny, and need more sleep. If you memorize these things and you implement them, then women stay grounded and well. The issues that most people face is when we don't know the menstrual cycle and we don't know how to honor it. So then we subconsciously or consciously expect women to behave like men, to show up the same way every day. And that's where the judgment comes in.
I just want to share with the listeners, it has felt so good as a man to know these things and help guide my female partners into living a life that is more aligned with their cycle. Because to be honest, I've dated mostly women that have been convinced to live in this linear society that is all force, push, boss babe, go for it, grind. Take the medication that gets rid of your period, whatever it is. There's so much influence to be like a linear being. And if you can learn this stuff, and whether your partner knows it or not, but if you're with a woman that doesn't know this and you can start to encourage them to get in touch with their cyclical nature, talk about masculine, mature leadership that's like, hey, go, where are you at in your cycle? What's going on? And leading them to learn and connect to their own feminine cycle. Oh, man.
I mean, that's like talk dirty to me, right? Men telling me to rest, men whispering into my ear, hey, you're luteal and you're about to bleed. You actually deserve more sleep. Your body needs it. That's going to make me horny. That form of love, men understanding my cyclical needs, memorizing them, and being a loving reminder for me to achieve my needs. What else could a woman want? Right? It's one thing, right? I mean, it's women are so deeply indoctrinated to believe that in order to be successful, they have to act like men. And I'm here for the remembrance that success is rooted in rest. And the menstrual cycle teaches us, hey, if you forgot to rest, the luteal phase is here to remind you to rest. Because when you really rest in the luteal phase and you nourish your body, by the time your period comes, you don't have painful periods, they're not extremely long, and you have a lot of creativity. And in fact, a lot of women enjoy period sex, but men don't realize that because they've been told that they're not welcome, that it's dirty, that it's not sexy, when in fact, period blood, because it's a liquid, can be a really phenomenal lubricant if you need that.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that all women like period sex.
Yeah.
Not all of them do, and that's important to name.
Yeah.
But when we really honor the menstrual cycle, we understand that there's a predictability, right? I feel like so often I hear men
Yeah.
navigate rupture with their women and be like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
she's so unpredictable, man. Like,
Yeah.
so hard. She's so crazy. I don't know what to do. And I'm here to be like, no, you just learned the menstrual cycle.
There's a cycle. It happens every 28 days.
Literally. And but also it's not always every 28 days, which is important to note, right?
Okay.
For some women, the average is every 25 days. A healthy menstrual cycle is anywhere between 25 days up to 33 days,
Okay.
which is why it's really helpful to understand the lunar cycle.
Mm.
Because the full moon comes about every 28 days, but there are some full moons in a year that are every like 29, Some of them are 30 days, some of them are 25. So just like the moon, it's not always so regular, right? You have to have open conversations with women.
I love
Women
that.
need to be off of birth control to actually know their cycle, to
Yeah.
know, like, hey, I've been consistently for the past 4 months having a 28-day cycle, but they might be tracking their cycle on, and for them, 26 is their norm, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want us to get too
Yeah. Yeah.
attached
Yeah. I
to
love
the
that. And
28 number.
that's more getting back to that linear. So I would love to tie all of this back to really understanding ovulation, when that window is, and what was such a huge impact for me in alleviating a lot of that stress I felt around pregnancy.
Totally. Do you want to go ahead and share about ovulation, or do you want me to?
I'd love for you to, and I'll just like come in with my experience of
Sweet.
what connected for me.
Sweet. So if we're going based off of a 28-day cycle, with the caveat that actually most women are not 28 days, about halfway between cycle day 12 and cycle day 16, notice that I'm saying a 4-day range is about when ovulation occurs. Okay. So during the follicular phase leading up to ovulation, the follicle gets released, gets developed. Ovulation is when an egg gets dropped. Only when an egg gets dropped can the egg meet sperm and select sperm. So I just want to really clearly state that we've been told, and we've been given this visual and this metaphor, that conception is when the sperm race and they do this race to meet the egg. That storytelling that sperm are racing and competing against each other is perpetuating toxic masculinity. It perpetuates men to think that they have to compete against each other to get their romantic and sexual needs met. Conception occurs not when the sperm are racing. Conception occurs if and only if there's a viable egg and the egg receives all of these sperm, and she, as the queen bee, decides which sperm is the best. And let me tell you, she is entitled, she is picky, and she knows how to weed out the losers. Okay. But seriously, there's a brilliance. When you think about every human that gets born, it's amazing to think about that in order for that baby to be born, an egg needed to sift through over thousands of different sperm and decide which was going to be the strongest, most resilient sperm to create the most healthy, loved, and grounded baby. So when we talk about ovulation, ovulation is when women are fertile. Ovulation is when conception can happen. If there's no egg during menstruation, there's no egg. During the follicular phase, there's no egg. So this is typically from cycle day 1 all the way up until roughly cycle day 10. And it depends on the woman's body. I really want to name that all of this depends on the individual, like, woman's body. Okay. Only when the egg gets released is conception possible. So I just want to break the myth that it's possible for women to get pregnant at every stage of the month. Now, the caveat here is our culture incentivizes women to do certain behaviors that make them unwell, that make them imbalanced in their hormones. Okay. I'm teaching a whole masterclass on March 23rd for women called Intuitive Flow. And it's all to teach women about the menstrual cycle and how to cultivate healthy hormones. Hormones are a reflection of how we behave, how we treat our bodies, right? So if a woman is fertile, she has healthy hormones, then when she's ovulating and sperm enters the vagina and travels all the way up, then and only then does the egg choose whether or not she wants to receive a sperm. They Basically, if you visualize this as the egg, the sperm coats the egg. I love to visualize strawberries dipped in chocolate. Strawberries are the egg, and the strawberry gets to pick what part of the fondue she's dipping in chocolate. Okay. So ovulation is essential as a biomarker because it indicates if a woman's fertile. But what's so important to name is because we live in a society that tells us that ovulation is completely optional. The society tells us only if you want a baby does it matter whether or not you ovulate. And that could not be further from the truth. Ovulation is a direct reflection of how well a woman is. It indicates how healthy her thyroid is. It indicates how healthy her nervous system is. It's an indication of her whole reproductive system functioning well. That has nothing to do with fertility. In fact, fertility is just this added bonus of ovulation. But I want to see a world where every woman ovulates and everyone knows when they're ovulating. Not because I think that all women should conceive babies. I think all women should do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah.
But to ovulate means that you're well. And when you're on birth control and any other form of birth control, not just the pill, what they do essentially is they shut off ovulation.
Yeah.
So for all the men who are here who are holding this myth that it's possible to conceive a baby throughout the month, I'm here to dispel that myth and to say that cultivating fertility is an essential biomarker for women's overall health.
Hmm.
And if and when women are unwell or when they are navigating hormonal imbalance, that's when it's even more important to track the cycle. Because on average, a woman is ovulating between cycle day 12 and 16. But it's possible that because of hormonal imbalance, that she might be ovulating on cycle day 8 through 12. It's possible that she's ovulating cycle day 16 through 20. These are really big, wide range, which just reinforces my point of we need to track the menstrual cycle. We need to know exactly when we're ovulating. Because once we know when we're ovulating and when we are fertile and we have concrete data that's based in scientific data from our bodies, biomarkers that our bodies are offering us, then we're able to have sex and have intercourse with or without a condom when the woman isn't fertile and to feel confident that there's not going to be pregnancy. Education on the female body directly leads to less anxiety of pregnancy.
Yeah.
When you know when you're ovulating and when you're not ovulating, sex is not about controlling whether or not it's pregnancy. Sex becomes about connecting. Sex becomes an opportunity to reveal your needs, to be taken care of, to take care of, to feel the eros, which is what I believe sex is meant to be about.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the lack of education of female fertility gets in the way.
My partner at the time when I was really learning all this, she was taking her temperature and she had a little device where she would take her temperature and she would record these different things and she was learning about her cycle. I felt she was deeply connecting with herself every day in a way that so many women aren't. And once again, for me, I felt such a relief of stress. And it was I think it was another piece for me. Maybe this is why I actually value the when a woman's in is bleeding is I knew almost guaranteed that that wasn't possible for conception to happen. And so and then I started, and I felt so connected to my partner knowing when their ovulation was. And then it was just like this time that we were more, we brought more safety to it. but it was every aspect of it was connecting, whether it was me and her connecting to her own body, or even me connecting to my leadership once again, that was like reminding her or having these conversations like, hey, did you take your temperature today? Or hey, like just pointing her in that direction of connecting with herself in a beautiful, loving way. And this is what I really want you men to hear is this aspect of empowerment for yourself in the understanding and the education, the opportunity of leadership that there is, whatever relationships you might be with a partner that doesn't know this stuff. And you can bring this information and start cultivating with the both of you and encouraging her to connect with herself and learn this about her body. And ultimately, I think we tapped into this earlier is if you start to understand the cyclical nature of the women in your life, it's going to be less perplexing. It's going to be less confusing. And it is an actual shift of none of this makes sense to, wow, this makes sense. Like that is the shift right there, is this chaotic nature to simple cyclical nature understanding that brings a lot of peace for everyone.
Yeah. And not only even for the moment, it gives you future peace, right? You want to go on a trip. You want to go on a climbing trip with your lover. You track her cycle and you know that when you're thinking of going on that trip and is when she's ovulating, you best know that she's going to be super adventurous, super excited, super open, super eager to take risks, super horny, right? You plan that when she is the beginning phase of her luteal phase, so typically around cycle day 19 to cycle day 23, you're going to get a different personality type, right? Just even tracking the cycle helps in the moment. It also leads you to planning your whole life together to optimize harmony with her cyclical needs. I don't go on vacation when I'm luteal. Are you kidding? I'm gonna want to be taking selfies with my friend or with my lover, and every single selfie, I'm gonna be like, I cannot believe I left the house. Nobody should see me. In contrast, when I'm ovulating, I'm like, let's do a photo shoot. Wow, look at that lingerie. Damn, like how beautiful is my body? It's just totally different. And there's so much crazy amounts of magic and wisdom that the luteal phase brings. Oh my God, if we didn't have the luteal phase, divorces might not occur, breakups might not occur. And sometimes breakups need to happen and divorces need to happen. Sometimes the elephant in the room needs to be spoken.
Hmm.
Sometimes systems need to be changed because they're corrupt. We thank the luteal phase for bringing this fierce devotion to truth and willingness to say the truth, even if it's hard to hear. So there's, by all means, I love the luteal phase, and there's so much magic in it. And it's not the best time to plan a sweet, romantic, sexy vacation. It's a good time to plan a date that's movie night, make some cookies, homemade dinner, a sweet grounding bath time, erotic lovemaking. But it might not be the time to, stay up really late, do drugs, go to a party with 100 people, and then like want to process a whole fight that's like 5 years old.
One thing that comes to mind too in this relational dynamic is this leads to so much more nourishment for everyone. When our female partners are connected to their cycles, are respecting and dancing with those seasons, and we're understanding and dancing with them as well. It's the amount of nourishment that comes from it is a whole different ballgame that I don't think a lot of couples are experiencing right now because the women are trying to live so linear and the men are encouraging them to live so linear. And then everyone's wondering why they're so malnourished for love and attention and affection. So Thank you, Jay, so much for all the wisdom that you shared today. And I'll let you leave us with whatever you want to leave us, all the listeners with. And then please share about any of the trainings that you want to talk about, and I'll put those in the description.
Totally. Something I just want to leave us with is a participant from my last round of menstruation, which is a virtual online container that I offer once a year. It's typically about 7 to 8 weeks long for for men, sorry, to get a deep dive into the menstrual cycle. And not only to be taught by me, but to be in a space with other men who are all saying that this is valuable and that they want to receive the tool. It is so powerful. At the closing call, one of the men shared something along the lines of like, wow, Jay, like I just didn't realize that learning the menstrual cycle is essentially like a copy and paste tool for everything. And now that I understand in depth how the menstrual cycle works of every phase in the cycle, I feel complete confidence in my ability to plan a life that honors women's needs. And I was just like, that brought me so much joy to hear that and feels like the most important reason as to why men should learn the menstrual cycle, right? Everybody should learn the menstrual cycle because it's valuable on its own. But what's a really personal, relatable reason as to why men need to learn about it is because it makes their experience of relating to women, not only romantically, their coworkers, their bosses, their moms, their siblings, their friend's wife, every single woman in your life. It helps you understand her better. It's like the most helpful and straightforward and honestly logical tool for intimacy. It's nearly impossible to feel like we understand someone and to respect someone if we perceive them to be illogical and chaotic all the time.
Mm, mm,
So I just want to leave us with that, which is that just the remembrance that the menstrual cycle brings us back to our truest nature. It brings us back to our connection with the land. It brings us back into connection with our own beloved mothers who did the hard work to bring us here
mm,
and is the foundation of whether or not you want to become a father.
mm.
Because
Thank you.
one day you're going to have a little girl who you get to be that father who has a beautiful, open conversation with her about her body with her.
Thank you so much, Jay, for the work that you do in the world. Thank you for coming on the show. And listeners, you can find that information in the description. We'll see you. You'll hear us on the next episode. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Take care.